I definitely want to make this as interactive as possible. I think that's on cue with the metaverse and what that means. So feel free to jump in. This is a small group. I'm here just like any of you. I'm here just like the rest of you. I'm interested in the space. I'm here to meet interesting people. By no means am I an expert in this area. It's relatively new and people have a lot of different opinions. So I'm just here to create some conversation, some thought fodder for all of us, and hopefully collectively we can grow as a team here. So I have a few prepared slides just to kind of spark the conversation, but again, happy to jump in or happy to take questions or conversations along the way. Sound good, guys? Thumbs up for those that I can see. Awesome.
I mean, what you just said about the small circle, that's the only screen I got to. I couldn't get past that like video. So like the first time I tried to upload my avatar, my typical headshot.
Yeah.
It was even like, it wouldn't fit. It was too big and the way it was. And then the second one was like, yeah, I think it's like, you never really, it was out of focus. I think even the avatar profile pictures in the metaverse, it's even very important still. Like your JPEG skills.
JPEGs, your NFTs, your, let's see, maybe something more interactive. I think this idea of identity is going to continue to be an element in the metaverse.
But did you all get into this, into the actual platform? Like I couldn't get in. Yeah.
Some of us were there. There was maybe a subset of us that were there, and we were just like these floating circles in this New York City looking background.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, and it was interesting because they also had spatial audio. So the further away you were, the less you heard people. I remember speaking to someone on the corner, and I heard a bunch of murmur from a bigger group. So people are experimenting with that as well. Kind of mimics the real world that way. Cool. I was actually saying, since we're chatting, I'll get into this. I was just saying this to someone at the event earlier today, which was, I think where we are is kind of like where we were in the 90s with billboards and banner ads. We took the physical world, we had these things on the highways, and then you put this on the internet and you had some text-based ads, right? The early Google search terms and all that good stuff. But I think similarly, we're in that space where, partly because of the pandemic, a lot of us were working from home or forced to be working virtually. And then we got into these Brady boxes, right? These squares that we're all sitting at. And then here I am, like arm's length away from you guys. And there's already been a lot of studies around how there's this whole fatigue around Zoom and virtual areas. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity as people become more interactive, as we are online, for experiences to become more immersive, for content to become more interesting, just not going from the banner ads, the interactive ads, the links and all that. So, and this is, I'll try to touch on that a little bit later on around creators and what's going on in that space. But conceptually, this is how I think about this. I think another way people think about this is that this is the new, Internet 3.0, Web 3. This is just the natural iteration of the internet where it's going from transactional to more interactions. It's making it much more lifelike that way. So just some starting thoughts there. Cool. So again, prepared remarks. I'm Shantanu, born and raised outside New York, currently in San Francisco. I work for this company called Soul Machines, but I'm not here for Soul Machines. I'm here as a citizen, a private citizen. I just wanted to give you guys some perspective of what I worked on, just to take that in as you guys listen to what I have to say. I did work at Watson, which was IBM's AI platform when I first kicked off, and I was a product manager there. I also have a background in bioengineering. So I also think about this from the human element and all this together. So just a little bit of background just to give you context as you take in the information. I'm not sure if many of you saw the announcement today. I'm sure it's plastered all over the internet in terms of Mark Zuckerberg and renaming Facebook to Meta. So I added that last thing here right at the last minute, but there's a lot of buzz even before this around the metaverse and what that is. And you're seeing some of the big platforms making comments on that, from the big gaming platforms like Unity and Unreal, thinking about this as the revolution of computing, to the platforms on top who are trying to create content. What was interesting, in the top right corner here, this is the CEO of NVIDIA. What they're famously known for is the GPU chips, but they're very much focused on the processing behind that. And during his last talk, about 3-4 months ago, they actually replicated part of his talk to then the digital CGI character. And so that's his kind of example of showcasing like, oh, I can give talks and do that in that space. And so it's interesting that you're starting to see corporate CEOs use this technology to talk about communication, take advantage of this, and showcase that we're here now. And I guess one of the things I would say, and this is really popular opinion, but just to confirm this, is that it's not that Metaverse is coming, it's that it's here, and we're in a very early version of this. Alluding back to my banner ad analogy, right? It's been talked about. Metaverse was coined in 1993 on the Snow Crash book. If you're interested in sci-fi, I recommend reading it just to get an idea of what it is. It's kind of an interesting book, but there's obviously been showcased in movies and other areas as well. But the killer app and the killer use cases are still being shaked out, right? Anything from shopping and interactions and gaming to work and co-working. There's a lot of use cases, a lot of excitement. I think part of it's going to be uptick devices, how people interact, how they make it easy for people to do certain tasks and activities. So still a lot to be had in terms of this space overall. And this is a graphic on the right side that kind of explains what the metaverse is. This is one of a few different points of view around this space. So recommend if you're interested in going deeper, there's two kind of prolific writers in this space that I've seen. One is on the left-hand side. His name is Matthew Ball. Mark Zuckerberg referred to him in an interview a few months ago. He has a 9-part primer about what the metaverse is and talks about the interconnectivity of it. He even launched his own ETF called Metaverse or Meta by Roundhill. So if you want to invest in metaverse companies, that's an opportunity in that space. On the right-hand side, there's a guy named John Radoff. He's been pretty prolific since the early part of 2021. And he also has some very cool areas in that space. So, I'm happy to go through a little bit of the layers with you guys just to talk through this, but definitely recommend as you guys get into it to do your own reading, do your own research, because you'll take your own approaches from this. I think the biggest thing from this graphic that I'll take away is that it's interconnected and the layers are being built. In each layer, there are certain companies working at certain layers in terms of big tech. This also means there's a lot of opportunity for smaller companies and projects that folks like yourselves are interested in to get into and provide these areas. I'll take a few layers just to talk through this, but we can also, if people have other questions, we can dive into it as we go along here. In terms of the experience layer, this is where people are really experiencing what's out there.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Will we be able to share those?
Who's speaking?
Well, yeah. Would you be able to share those slides later?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. Nothing's proprietary. So yeah,
right.
Happy to.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Alec, for your comment. Matthew Ball's Meta ETF got some great brand exposure.
You were on layers.
Say again?
No, you were just picking up after the layers. You were going into the layers.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for reminding me. So layers, right? I mean, this is one visual, as I was saying before. There's a few different areas of this and other folks, but everyone's kind of going after the fact that things are being built on top of each other, right? And just going from the top down, you're thinking about the experience layer. This is the layer where you and I are, really seeing the visualization of this all. If we take the example that we were just in terms of nowhere, you start to see the background, you start to see what you can do in that space in terms of controls. You start to understand what activities can be done. In the nowhere example, it was a relatively simple digital experience where us as the individuals were walked around and we created our own content by us talking to each other through the video cameras. But other experiences like games or other interactive experiences come from brands where you can interact with the world. You can maybe look at clothes, you can do games. And this is a lot of what we're going to see when it comes to just the interactivity. I can't stress enough that what I think is really different between the metaverse and the internet of today is the difference between transactions to interactions. I'll say that again, from transactions to interactions. Yes, the internet kind of really took off with e-commerce. Yes, the internet took off from consuming content in terms of videos and tweets, but it's still, a one-way transmission a lot. Social media tried to change that a bit and has successfully in some cases in terms of making it a bit more back and forth, but it's still, limited its modality in terms of its immersiveness. And so as we get into these more immersive experiences, you can start to see data differently. You can start to interact with the world differently. And I think that's what's really exciting, is because that unlocks new use cases. I'm going to go to a limb here and say, and I know there's a lot of folks, and I'm sure there's folks in this audience that are all about AR and VR. VR will definitely be a part of it, or headsets are definitely going to be a part of it in terms of that experience. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not required for the metaverse to be there. In fact, I think as a design principle, people who are building out these experiences will need to consider those who don't want to put a headset on or can't put a headset on and make it exclusive that way. So there'll be a way to have a hybrid experience. There might be ways which you'll have to figure out how to blend in. And even today, through our Zoom experience, I have boxes up top. I have content I'm showing you through the Zoom share, and that's a early version of the metaverse today, right? Where we are interacting and I am sharing content and trying to make it interactive. So, but yeah, in terms of the experience layer, there's going to be a lot of experiences that are created, and there'll be a lot of creators that are creating these experiences. In terms of discovery, you have to really figure out how to get to these experiences. So as you get into these virtual worlds, we can think of it as, it's infinite. There's infinite amount of worlds that can be created, right? Whether you're in a pirate ship, a castle, space, something in between. And us humans or us individuals can only go to the worlds at the same time, or we're not sure where to go to. And so whether it's by ads or tipping or social constructs, things that we do today, I think you're going to see a lot of that happening in this area because, again, this is a new modality. It's an extension of some of the digital content that's out there today. And this could be AI-based, it could be human-based. And I think there'll be some new modalities that'll be created to help people navigate where they're going to. I'm not sure if many of you on the call today have worked or played with Roblox or some of these other games, but you're starting to see early levels of, okay, how do I find out where to go? You might go to your friend's world because that's what or you're supporting somebody, but you might be looking for new things as well. Or another example is like Clubhouse or some of these other new social audio areas. How do you discover content in a meaningful way? So again, you're starting to see elements of that in today's world. That's going to be an important layer. And then just for the sake of brevity, unless folks have questions, I'll just do one more layer, which is the creator economy. Super interesting, super buzzy in the past, let's say, year in terms of both the VC investments, startups, et cetera. But I think this does kind of solidify some of the trends we're seeing in today's world, where a lot of people are able to create content, create interesting experiences, and getting paid for this all online. And so when we talk about creators, I think there's several different types of creators. There's content creators, there's technology creators, there's platform creators, but this idea that you can create content and create experiences that people want to consume and are willing to consume in various ways, and monetization comes along with that. It's super exciting and allows for new businesses to be created. And I think that's what a lot of these broader platforms are really advocating for. And you're starting to see hundreds of millions of dollars being invested from these large tech companies to support creators on their platforms. And that also opens up an opportunity for companies and individuals to create tools to support these creators on these platforms.
Yeah, I think that's what was interesting today on when Mark Zuckerberg was talking to you about creators making money in Meta as well, and also having like e-commerce inside Meta, including advertising to get your Facebook Meta shop, being linked to. You're saying even sound like it'd be like direct URL links to get directly to your Meta page, Meta like Facebook store. And even talked about like basically like you're saying, creators making money off the assets they make.
Yeah, I mean, you're starting to see a little bit of that with the NFT space. Artists or other folks are creating these digital assets. People are valuing them for different reasons. I mean, there's a monetization in that way. So again, you're starting to see these behaviors pop up in different ways, and it's a question of how this will all kind of come together. Any other comments or questions in the audience?
Well, I was going to say, since the NFT boom is happening, I think it's also going to play a big part in the creator economy for the metaverse and trying to integrate NFTs now with that. And you might start seeing a lot of that now because NFTs is just blowing up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely blowing up. And I think with any new medium and new platforms, people experiment. There's obviously a lot of real money being used and being transacted because of these things. So it does stand to say that there's something there, and this may be a way for us to transact and interact in the digital world. So super cool. Great.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just echoing the Facebook talk about how to find things. When you have unlimited space and so much that could possibly happen, discovery is like everything. It's one thing if you're like a captive audience, like imagine you're at an amusement park and you have to pay like $7 for a bottle of water because that's what's there, or you go on this ride because that's what's there. And when you take away like the space constraints to go online, we've seen like all these companies become trillion-dollar companies because they figured out ads, discovery, whatever, monetization. And that's just going to get even bigger with the metaverse and kind of global reach of things.
But one of the things that
A lot
they
of
did,
these
oh, sorry.
companies are not trillion-dollar companies. The valuations are fantasies. So the companies that are actually selling something, producing something, and getting actual revenue, I think there needs to be the distinction. I actually have a couple. I'm new to this area, though not new to the internet or governance and legal issues. I taught a master's class at George Washington University in information policy. I put the link to Lawrence Lessig's book, Code 2.0. It's an old book, but it's completely relevant. There are actual interesting discussions around doing exactly what you guys are talking about here today. But this experience level, again, as I mentioned in the other short discussion, the infrastructure is going to sit on someone's going to own the server, and it's going to sit within a particular place, and that place is going to be governed by national laws. Even though Mark Zuckerberg may think that Facebook is a nation state, it's not. I'm not even being facetious. I just think it will be, without trusted identity. So the commerce piece, and when the internet itself was built, and I've done a lot of work on internet governance over the years, they did not build in privacy and security because that's not what it was built for originally. So the question here is, as this is being developed out, are those requirements for the management of data from different levels being built in? Does anyone know?
So, I mean, I can speak to a few areas. So Mark, if we talk about this session, Mark Zuckerberg did say he's doing that. Obviously, what someone says they do and what they actually do may not be exactly the same, but I think a lot of the inquiries have definitely shaken, or at least been heard from in terms of big tech. When I worked at Watson, which is IBM's platform, IBM does, part of their business model was to be enterprise friendly, and enterprises require data security and data privacy, and they tend to be more in that space. So, GDPR, although it's not perfect, I spent a quarter of my product resource engineering just getting backwards compatibiling our products so that we would be working on these regulations. So I think as people move forward, there's privacy, at least in the States, in the United States, is definitely a top of mind area. And I'm sure with all these continuing congressional hearings, people are in those organizations are going to want to put this in front and center, especially because it's a selling point. You saw Apple, whether it's true or not, sell their differentiation as being privacy, right? And so I think they'll try, and I think there's going to be a lot of things to be working through in terms of how that works. You mentioned the server issue as being one. That's a current problem today, right? Or a current issue they're addressing. What does that look like in the future as more data is captured, as more of your behaviors are captured because the way that you swing a tennis ball or the way that you interact with your friends in a virtual space. I think a lot of that is still TBD from what I can tell.
I might have been the only one that read through the terms of service for Nowhere when I created my account.
Yeah.
But if you read the terms of service, you will see that they say that they own all the content that is created during the time that you're there. So to the extent that anyone was having some, eureka moment and came up with some idea and they overheard, you can't own anything it's there. So it's just something to think about that most people don't think about, this issue of the ownership and the use of personal data or what you create.
I mean, I think that's an opportunity for a premium product though, right? You see that today with today's internet's platforms where you can, at least enterprises, you can choose to have a Amazon Web Service. You know, the MI6 out of London just announced they're using Amazon Web Services. I'm sure they have an agreement where they have their own dedicated server and cloud, and they're using the technologies, but they pay for the privilege of keeping their data in a certain way.
And Facebook isn't the only player, right? Like you have Fortnite that's potentially going to be able to create their own platform because of the amount of people that are following them. They have their own servers. So I guess like Facebook might have a good conversion rate because everybody's using Facebook, but they're not the ones that are like the center of this whole space.
I think a big thing is blockchain technology. Assign people their own unique identifier and secure it that way.
Yeah, it's definitely a solution that people are investigating to help out, right? In terms of how do you own your data and how do you make sure that you're able to be independent. But I think you guys are all bringing up great points, right? I think as you go into this next version of internet, there's a lot more considerations than there were in the 90s when this first came out. And so things need to be worked through both from a legislation perspective and then also what social norms are. The biggest thing is the social norms are much different back then than they were now. And so, 20 years later, here we are rethinking what is normal, what's acceptable. And it obviously changes depending what country you're in too. So with any, like I said, with any new modality, there comes new behaviors and new opportunities to kind of change what it was and what it will be. So just, since we started talking about other companies in the space, I think that's a great segue into, again, this is from John, but it's indicative to showcase that a lot of companies that you've heard of before are already playing in different layers within the metaverse. The large tech companies, the small tech companies, you'll see some of the logos there, and they all are going to start pivoting, in my humble opinion. They're all going to start pivoting or adding the metaverse to their marketing, talk about how their products can help people support what they're doing today. And someone mentioned Epic's Fortnite. Yeah, Epic is one of those game engines, created Fortnite, blew up. They have great user experience, and they're starting to create tools to make people, allow creators to do things similar in that space, create new worlds. The CEO of Epic, Tim Sweeney, is a major proponent of the metaverse. And the reason why he's suing Apple and Google because of their app stores is because he thinks things should be open. And in order for us to be more open, we need to be able to not have all these fees. So, Mark on today's panel, just thought, Mark, I don't want to keep harping on this. It's just since it's so fresh, but Mark Zuckerberg also made a jab at the fact that things need to be open and free. So to this idea of open standards and to this idea of interoperability, I think that may address some of the privacy or terms of use issues in terms of making it more standard, but we're still pretty far away from that in terms of broader interaction. Go ahead. So whoever I cut off, sorry about that.
Yeah, I think Epic is still on the fence actually. Okay. They're moving closer to it. Like I host in Miami here. I host the Unreal Engine and also the Unity and Magic Leap user groups. So cool. Unity and Magic Leap and even like William Shatner are on our blockchain advisory board, but Epic turned us down basically. So I've noticed going through the whole process, like Unity is kind of decentralized, right? You just go through their ranks and find one person say yes, and that's it, right? Epic is still like top down, so you still got to eventually get to Sweeney and it's whatever his personal opinion is. It seems like, and today he's into it. Yesterday he wasn't, so we don't know. But yeah, Zuckerberg's thing was pretty cool. What he said today, he almost seemed like it was a jab against Apple because Epic is suing Apple, so now they're Epic's best friend.
Yeah, all these guys are pissed off at Apple and Google because they own the platform and they're unable to collect data. They're unable to do things that they could have. Facebook just trying to create their own devices. They bought Oculus so that they could own the new platform. But to that earlier person's point, what's going to happen? They have a huge privacy concern. People's are much more awake and concerned about that than they were 10 years ago when he acquired Oculus or 8 years ago. And so business will change. that'll be part of the future in terms of as this goes forward and becomes mainstream.
Yeah, and your slide would probably like make people jealous or mad or whatever. Like so many of our crypto friends are off not on your slide. Of course, it would take up all your space if you added all of us on there.
Yes. Again, indicative of just showcasing that there's a lot of activity. But that doesn't mean for those entrepreneurs or people who are in the space, it doesn't mean it's fully taken there. Despite the fact that there doesn't seem to be that much white space, that there's a shit ton of white space. Excuse my language, but like it's just too early. Everyone's still figuring it out, and that opens up a lot of great opportunities for people who can navigate and are willing to think through this at a deeper level. Kind of last two things just to provoke conversation. I think we talked about people who are going to be in the metaverse and the experiences. There's a discussion about the types of individuals or roles in the experience layer that will be kind of required or will be emerging as this takes off. So obviously we talked about the creators. That's a big one that comes out there in terms of people who are actually creating the characters or creating the interactions in that space, but yet people who are going to be hyping it up in terms of community evangelists, people who are curating. Again, very similar to what you're seeing in the real world or the social media world, but you're going to start to see some of the same roles take off, but it'll be same, but different, right? It'll be adjacent because of the modality will be different. How you curate, how you build, what you do in that space will be really different and interesting because people can now engage more and be more interactive. And some of their content that they're creating can be seen in a whole new way. So really exciting in terms of this experience and flywheel, let's call it, of people coming in and making it really work together in a meaningful way and in a new modality. Comments, questions on this, guys? I love the conversation, by the way. I think this is a great, from a meetup perspective, this is a much better format than just lecturing.
No questions so far.
Cool. So a few more stats just to or a few more things just to kind of share and see what people think. So I found this stat online, Statistica. It's one of these data houses, and they're just talking about AR, VR. I know it's very near and dear to a lot of folks here in terms of the metaverse, and just think about use cases in AR, VR in the next 4 or 5 years. I actually spoke to someone, I forgot who it was, who was thinking about training as a use case, and it's like interesting to see gaming, which all makes sense. We know that gaming is something that people on-ramp into and people are doing today, but you're starting to see an intake of training, and it's probably stuff I would run here, but training, industrial maintenance, and retail showcasing. So if you think about these use cases in the metaverse, as these interactions become more interesting, as it becomes more applicable, where you don't necessarily need a head device or headset to go forward, I think you can start to see these and others start to increase in terms of its investment, in terms of people's spend, in terms of opportunities for creators to build content for, and for businesses to be created around. So something I thought I'd just share with folks as we all continue to learn and grow in this journey. And then the last thing, something I was doing some thinking around, love to get your feedback on this, is kind of like there's all these enabling technologies in the ecosystem, right? No platform is one specific technology. It actually requires a lot of different things coming together for it to uptake and take off. And so I kind of put together like 3 buckets, let's call it, of distribution, quality, and policy, and started thinking about certain specifics underneath that will help to accelerate the metaverse, accelerate this idea of people interacting. Some of this is metaverse related, some of this is underlying infrastructure. And if you go back to that layers of onion that we saw earlier, and some of this is the overloading technology to bring it together. So I'll kind of leave it up here and let people react to it rather than going through this. I guess when I spoke to Alec about this, one thing on the right-hand side here on policy and digital rights, we were talking about some of this earlier around privacy, but the fact is, like, what is your digital rights? What does it mean when you create your own avatar? Do you own it? We talk about NFTs. That's an interesting aspect to say ownership, but are the rights online going to be different than offline? Provided questions that people start to think about as we go into these new worlds. And then ethics overall, like if you have an AI bot who's in this virtual world, what law are they, succumb to, or what do they have to follow, given that it may not be in a specific server, or may not be in a specific area. So generally policy lags technology. It's been a trend, but it's something to consider as we go forward and as we learn from the past 20 years and how that will shape the next 20 years in terms of our use of the internet and digital technologies. So yeah, I'll pause here. If folks want to chat about this or have any comments.
I mean, one thing that this reminds me of is something that is on a strategy. So Ben Thompson, he kind of talked about how we got from the computing aspects of you have this giant shared device at like big companies to you have a computer at home. So you go from like scheduling your work at specific times and there's not enough slots to you have computer, you plan to play a game or sit around for a bit, to computer in your pocket. Like all of a sudden now you can be on your phone doing anything you need to do almost. Internet is widespread, high bandwidth, to like wearables and like your watch or something else, and it's just ambiently doing things. So I see a lot of these kind of going on the axis of reducing friction, whether it's the 5G, the bandwidth, the Starlink, now all this stuff, the speech technology, you can speak freely, it can like follow your motion, and all these things just make it easier and more able to interact with different people without someone having to become an expert on like what is the particular input style I need, what is all this specialized hardware and expensive access I need. Like all these kind of become ways to get more people on with less effort.
Exactly.
I might be rambling, I apologize, but like one of the ways I'm seeing this be problematic, right? So you have to have some sort of security in regards to the space that you're building on. So Facebook's going to have to, one, get the data, but two, then be able to secure it, right, in their system. And when you're looking at like ownership of the internet, we got 24% in the United States. So it's like you're dealing with cyber attacks already with Facebook and all this other stuff. So like when they're harvesting more data, when we're involved with their system, I think that's going to be a lot more problematic in the future. So like these security systems are going to have to be pretty unique to this kind of environment.
What ends up happening when, on a distributed sense, all these servers are located around the globe? Is there some sort of like international committee that handles this, or is it more of a country to country basis, border to border, kind of doubling back on like Christina was saying earlier with who's responsible for where the servers live? Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's like different treaties and like countries that extradite or investigate crimes and countries that don't. I definitely think this is an emerging space, and it's not always going to even be a particular company that's running things. There's going to be interconnected natures, and sure, there's the trunk backbones of internet and bandwidth, but the internet was also created to be resilient, so it can route around things. There's ways around all sorts of things, networks, firewalls, everything. So big concerns, but there's also a lot going on in terms of encryption, ownership, decentralization, and it's not going to be a metaverse with one company owning the globe's view of it. There's going to be interoperability. There's going to be some sort of ways to manage data access. Edge computing may play part of it. Who knows how much is kind of kept locally versus shipped elsewhere, if there's rules on how long it can remain viable. We could come up with crypto ideas, like time limited versions of what data is there, what signatures are needed to read it, how long. We're just scratching the surface of what's possible.
Yeah, I think it comes, that's the excitement, I think, at least an opportunity for everyone here, right? As you guys are ahead of the curve, I think, by even thinking about this and connecting and trying to think about what does it mean for me, what is the opportunities. It's amazing how much there is out there, but also know that it's not that early anymore. I mean, a major conglomerate, arguably one of the most valuable companies focusing on this. most
I
valuable in
think
terms
John,
of
sorry.
equity working on this. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I'll wait till you stop. If you're done.
Yeah, all I'm saying is, it's a great opportunity for folks who are interested in this space. A lot of content that's being created around this area. I do think that there's a convergence of some of the earlier texts around AR and VR content creation. The fact that people's behaviors have changed as a result of the pandemic. So you have more people who are willing to spend hours online. That's like a key inflection point in terms of adoption. Even at least in the States and elsewhere, return to home, return to work, hybrid work models. So you're going to continue to see this behavior change where people are more accepting of being online. And then what do you do with that? How do you manage those hours that are online? And so that's what begets some of this opportunity for individuals, entrepreneurs, and large companies to make life more interesting that way.
Yeah, and I think I don't want to. In some ways, I echo concerns about Facebook and big companies and all of that. But on the other hand, I don't think the winners have been anywhere close to decided. There's initiatives for kind of open metaverse that people can become involved with and understands identity rights and other things. So we don't have to just assume that big players today in social media or in advertising or other kind of data economies necessarily de facto run the metaverse. I think there's a lot of opportunity still and newcomers and new methods of working.
Yeah, and there's this concept of SCurves, right, in terms of any innovation. So one people would argue we're still in the early phases of the pioneer era or engineering era when it comes to this metaverse concept. A lot of new tech out there. People are trying to stake their land in terms of what they can do. There'll be constraints. There'll be a lot of engineering and development that's happening. And eventually we'll get to a place that's mass produced, right? And you can see that today with the internet. When it started in the 80s, it's ARPANET, and then HTML came along, and then you had better ways of making web pages. And now we have folks on social media that are able to just pop a tweet or create a video. And so just this idea of making it super simple, making tools there and helping to define the social norms, define the experiences is part of all this.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to know how to configure your modem and all these arcane commands to go update something online, and now you just open an app on your phone and just talk to it and it appears online. Like that is pretty incredible how far we've gone.
Yeah,
That's a big leap.
Yep.
The one thing that nobody's mentioned is the human side of all of this, in the sense that, and I'll put on my mom hat and my philosopher hat, and theoretically, all of this is meant to, everybody's talking about Mark today. So Mark was the big connector. He was going to connect the whole world. But there are certainly opportunities, and clearly people want to build things and make money and all of that. But I think somehow people forget that you actually need to be a human being. You need to connect physically with other real human beings. The connectedness, the relationships that you have, the oxytocin that's produced from physical touch is really important. And I don't care. And I do have a degree in biology, so I'm pretty sure about this, but I don't think you get the same hit in a virtual environment that you would get in a real environment. And I think we need to, just like China has put limits on how many hours a day the kids can game now, because China knows from a national security perspective that it needs to make sure that that they're focusing on other things other than just playing games. So I throw that out there to where everyone's gung-ho moving 100 miles an hour in this one direction to create all these different opportunities to be online 24 hours a day. Just think about the human part, that there needs to be some level of tempering that.
Well,
I think that's being. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I understand fully that, like, you know, in regards to my philosophies, this is like, you know, taking away from what I think is the human experience, but that's also not for me to say right now because this is part of like what we want. There's a demand for people wanting to go in this space, and it's already happening. There's no changing that. So now it's just kind of seeing what direction it's going and trying to make it maybe better so it's not worse.
They're getting pretty close with haptic feedback and actually simulating a touch, even with gloves, to be able to have like restraints so you can feel like you're grabbing something. So I don't know, they're getting pretty close with it.
And I think we as a species will also have to adapt, right? I think kids growing up these days have been exposed to these technologies early on. So maybe they sort of excrete the same amount of oxytocin or any other biological hormone as you would physically interacting with someone, right? We as a species evolved to the internet. We as a species will evolve towards a virtual world, towards a metaverse as we grow up and as we interact and get used to and sort of morph into these technologies over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a lot to consider in terms of what I was mentioning in our other chat, like the incentives and the agency of people. Like you have a lot of games that have somewhat predatory mechanics now, or social media with that. We want to be careful we don't make even more of our lives that way. So lots to consider. We are a little bit over. Thank everyone for being so excited and chatting with the group here. Just anyone have a quick final thought before we sign off?
Yeah, just real quick. I think like everyone's focusing on the Zuckerberg thing today, but the really interesting thing for this group, I think, was the John Carmack talk. And it was like very stream of consciousness. There was no slides. So you might have to watch it like 5-6 times to get it, but it was very dense. You should definitely watch that. I think that was the
Yeah,
third today.
he's a super deep thinker. I absolutely agree with that.
And just to put like the tech angle on this, like I was comparing what John Carmack was saying and Zuckerberg was saying with the existing technology of how Decentraland works and some of other things too. And I think from that point of view, you can look at the philosophy too of where they're going based upon what the existing technology is, what they choose to use, not to use. So that maybe further meetups, maybe we can go into that to break down how the technology works and what that means for security and such. So I think we can backward engineer this stuff based on what they're doing.
Yeah, let's chat some more.
Definitely. Quick note, I spent the weekend at a Metaverse festival, a Metaverse school, and a couple other things in Decentraland, and it was a trippy experience, but I totally see it moving this way for a big portion of our population. Just for not being able to go where they want to go, this will take them there instantly. And it's pretty interactive. So
Awesome.
Thank you for having this, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, everyone.